few episodes ago, I told you about this special deer in South Texas that turned out to be the compadre of the local caretaker of the ranch. Well, this one's about a buck named Ricky. Ricky was a fawn that was picked up on a ranch in Texas Hill Country and was raised by the manager and his wife. Every day they fed Ricky banana, Dorito chips, and Purina dog chow. The deer grew up in the house, and by the time he developed his first set of antlers, he was a nice little 8 point and just a big doofus when you get right down to it. Ricky just would show up everywhere, but every day, during the middle part of the day or whenever, he'd show up and eat his Dorito chips, his Dorito dog chow, and a banana. Ricky got to be a 2-year-old deer, and he was looking pretty good. But by the time he got to be a 3-year-old deer, because probably the bananas and the Dorito chips and Purina dog chow, which was high in energy and high in protein and all those other kind of good things, Ricky turned out to be a pretty good kind of buck. He was a big 10-point, probably in the 130s, 140s, and pretty impressive. Now, this particular ranch also hunted. It was hunted by clients of the company that owned the property. And as we're going into the 4th year, to that point, Ricky he'd walk by every deer stand on the property. It was a high fence place and about 2,000 acres, but no telling where Ricky would show up, and the hunters saw him very regularly. But he wasn't quite of the quality of the deer that were there that they could harvest if they held out long enough. And so going into the 4th year, this Ricky turned into an absolute monster of a buck. He was looking like he was probably going to be in the 160s. So by the late summer, I got a call from the ranch manager's wife, and she says, "Larry, nobody is going to shoot Ricky. You cannot let anybody shoot Ricky." Well, he looked like every other deer that was out there, essentially, and I knew he was going to have a really big set of antlers, and now he was big enough to where he could be on the menu for a lot of the hunters that were there. So I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And she goes, "You will not let anybody take Ricky. No way." So oh my gosh, I called the local game warden, then I called the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and asked them if I could catch this deer and mark him I could do a little bit of research on it as well too, to determine where this buck would show up on this property. And so, so we thought about it a little bit, and I said, here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch him, and got the permit. I'm going to catch him, and I'm going to take a freeze brand. Now, a freeze brand will turn the pigments so that they will produce white hair. So I shaved Ricky's sides after I caught him, and on his rib cage, and I put a huge no freeze brand on either side of his ribs and throughout the body. And also put 2 big pendulum ear tags like they use in cattle, orange ear tags. And I thought, okay, now I can go in front of these guys and say, if you see this deer, you do not mess with him in any form or fashion. Now, the interesting thing is over the years, we had produced a lot of 4-year-old deer on that property and older, and I noticed that a lot of times when they turned 4 years old, those deer really changed. And I guess Ricky was kind of the same way, because it looked like he walked up to the water to get a drink of water and saw this big set of antlers on his head. And up to that point, just a big doofus showed up where all the deer stands, and all of a sudden he kind of looked around. He just started like he was backing up. Totally turned, when so very often as deer do when they get to be 4.5 years of age. After freeze branding Ricky and putting those ear tags in his ears, he showed up with a big no on either side. Well, guess what? Nobody saw this deer during daylight hours. Starting about the 1st of October, Ricky totally disappeared during daylight. Now, the interesting thing is every night he would come to the house. He would eat his Dorito chips. They left banana out for him, and Purina dog chow. Every night this deer would show up. He'd show up about an hour after dark. He might chase does there in the front yard underneath the night light, but an hour before daylight, Ricky would disappear. And I tried to follow him. I could not find him. Well, about the time he started losing his antlers, back in about February or March, actually, Ricky would show up again, act like a huge doofus, show up all over the place, could be seen all hours of the day, and till the following year. At about the 1st of October, by now he was a really big 165 to 170 kind of class deer, and Ricky would totally disappear. He was not seen by hunters. Hunters were out in deer stands, walking, doing all kinds of different things, pretty much every day of that hunting season, which is a long one in Texas. Nobody ever saw Ricky. But every night, an hour after sunset, an hour after it was good dark, Ricky would show up at his at the appointed place there at the rancher's house and eat his Dorito chips, bananas, and Purina dog chow. This deer continued doing that every year until he got to be at least about 8 or 9 years old, and that was the last year that I had anything to do with that ranch. It ended up being sold at that point, but it was interesting how this deer, who needed not to fear anything, had grown up in the house with people, around people, how he knew that come September, October, hunting seasons, he would just flat disappear. We did not have radio telemetry at the time that we could mess with, so I have no earthly idea where this went. But as I said, try as I may, Ricky would disappear come hunting seasons during daylight hours, but he would come eat his bananas, Dorito chips, and Purina dog chow every night. And I'm sure he probably did that and finally just passed away, or maybe somebody in the next bunch of people, maybe they ended up taking him. But as far as I know, nobody ever did. But if a deer that is not has no reason to be afraid of anything is that way, just imagine how those deer that have been pressured a little bit with hunting pressure, how they can react. Maybe there are some unkillable bucks.